Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing my favorite fantasy romance standalones. Alright guys, I have had so many people request a fantasy romance standalone rec video, and I finally put one together. So these books are perfect if you're looking for a full fantasy romance story with an HEA, but you don't want to commit to a multi-book series. So I have around 8 to 10 fantasy romance books I'm going to talk about, and I am so excited to share these books with you. So similar to all my other rec videos, I will give you a spoiler-free plot synopsis for every book, along with my overall feelings. And if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about these fantasy romance standalones. But before we dive in to today's magical fantasy romance standalones, I want to show off these stunning roses I received from Rose Forever. These are 100% real preserved roses that last a year, no water or sunlight needed, and they come in a variety of gorgeous colors. Rose Forever creates stunning arrangements of preserved roses that last for a whole year without needing water or sunlight. They're handcrafted by floral specialists and come in these gorgeous hat boxes. If you're anything like me, you love a touch of elegance in your life, and these roses are perfect for adding a little extra beauty to your space, or for gifting to someone special. Imagine gifting this to your bookish bestie while recommending one of the standalones I'll share today. Talk about a romantic vibe. These roses would make the perfect Valentine's Day gift. So whether you'd like to treat yourself or surprise a loved one, Rose Forever is a must, and you can use my link down in the description below. Starting off, we have A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Milla Vane. This is an adult fantasy romance, captor-captive, enemies to lovers, one of the best FMCs I've ever read in a story. Oh my gosh, I love her. I love her so much. So in this story, we are following a barbarian prince named Maddox, and very early in the story, he finds out that his parents have been killed. So he is pretty sure he knows who's responsible, and while trying to get revenge, he comes across a wagon that has the prince and princess of who he believes killed his parents. So right before he is about to kill both of them, the princess even says, "Hey, I also absolutely hate my father. How about we get married and we get revenge together?" So first, Maddox is very unsure about this. He really just wants to kill them and be done with it. But eventually he agrees, and he does treat Yvonne pretty terribly in the beginning. He uses her kind of as a hostage, but slowly he starts to learn to respect her and sees how fierce she is and amazing. He is part, like I said, of a barbarian clan, so they have to do a lot of running, hunting, things like that. And Yvonne has I forget exactly what it is, but for some reason she isn't capable of keeping up with them, but she finds ways to outsmart essentially everyone. She is so incredibly intelligent and just one of the best FMCs, like I've said. So I absolutely love this book. The romance is so good. It is part of a series. However, the second book follows a completely different set of people in a different area, so you very much can read them as standalones. I gave this first book 5 stars, 6 stars really. This second book I didn't care for nearly as much, and I believe a third book has released or is going to release. But once again, you can read these all as standalones, and please pick this book up. And next up, we have Anastasia by Sophie Lark. This was Sophie Lark's debut into fantasy romance, and when this book first released, it got a lot of mixed reviews, so it took me quite a while to pick this book up. I am so mad at myself for waiting. I loved this book. If you're a fan of the Anastasia cartoon, it is essentially exactly that story, but add a really cool magic system and an enemies to lovers romance. This book was perfection. So if you're unfamiliar with the plot of Anastasia, it's exactly like the cartoon. We're following this girl. She is the 4th daughter of the Romanov family, so a very high family in power. and they all possess magic, and the father possesses a very powerful magical ability, which is why he is kind of one of the leaders. But anyway, when Anastasia is very young, her father ends up capturing this young Cossack rebel named Damien, and Damien and Anastasia end up growing up together and have a bit of a forbidden romance, all while the evil Rasputin is kind of in the background, and it's just so, so good. My only critique with this book is it uses a trope at the very end that I absolutely detest, but other than that, this would have been a 6-star read. Because of that trope and kind of all of the implications that happen at the end, I dropped it down to, I think, a 4.5, but still an amazing read and a standalone. And next up, we have a Beauty and the Beast reimagining, Entreat Me by Grace Draven. This is one of my absolute favorite books by this author. So in this story, we are following a cursed warlord and his son. The warlord is named Ballard, from what I remember, and he is slowly losing his humanity, and his son will too unless they're able to break the curse. And one day, the son ends up returning to this establishment with a beautiful woman that he believes can break the curse. Unfortunately, this beautiful woman is followed by her older sister, who is not okay with her younger sister marrying a complete stranger, let alone a complete stranger who is cursed. And it's actually a double romance, so we're following both Ballard, the older sister, Llewellyn, and then the son and the younger sister. So this was a very unique story. It's also a bit darker and definitely spicier than I was anticipating going in. So highly recommend, especially if you're a fan of Beauty and the Beast reimaginings. And next up is yet another Beauty and the Beast reimagining. So we have Curse of the Thorn King, and this is by Lisette Marshall. This is the same author that wrote Court of Blood and Bindings, which is one of my favorite fantasy romance series. But in this story, we are following Briannis, who is an assassin, and she's only one kill away from the life she's always dreamed of. She needs to kill the Fae King, who is cursed in Thornhill. So when she gets in there to kill him, she soon realizes that the castle he is staying in is actually sentient, and on top of that, she has to do whatever he says. So his voice has some sort of magical ability that she has to listen to whatever direction he gives her. So they are essentially stuck together until the curse is broken. So this was a really fun story. It was actually pretty short, so easily like a one-sitting type read. But if you are a fan of Beauty and the Beast reimaginings, I highly recommend. And next up, we have one of my absolute favorite Why Choose dark fantasy romances that happens to be a standalone. So Order of Scorpions by Ivy Asher. Now I will say, this is quite a thick book, but it is a standalone. We are following Offset, and at the beginning of our story, Offset wakes up in a cage with no memory of who she is, where she came from, even her name. So she is taken to be interrogated by this man who essentially begins torturing her until a group of assassins show up, kill the man that was torturing her, but leave her chained to the floor and essentially say, learn to toughen up like you're on your own. So Offset is eventually sold to this guild that trains people how to become like really good assassins. Then they're sold to different assassin guilds in the hopes that they can kill enough people and buy their freedom. Well, Offset ends up being purchased by that same group of assassins that left her chained to a floor. So she wants revenge, but she also wants to know who she is. And that is really what we're kind of uncovering throughout this story. And it is so, so good. So if you like dark, Why Choose romance, you need to read this. Next up, we have The Wolf and the Wildflower by Ella Fields. So in this story, we are following a heartbroken Fae Queen. After being completely betrayed by her husband, she seeks solace with a alpha wolf that she ends up meeting on a whim, and they have a very intense romance, only for the queen to realize she has to return to her duties and goes back to her husband and the kingdom. Then once she does that, the wolf realizes he is not okay with letting her go, and he promptly follows, and it's their romance. So I will say definitely check trigger warnings for this. There is cheating, which I know some people are very not comfortable reading about, totally get it, but this is one of my favorite books by Ella Fields, so highly recommend. And this next book is also by Ella Fields. However, I will admit I have not read this yet. So it is Amid Clouds and Bones. This is actually my Patreon pick for February. So I'll be reading this along with my patrons in February. But apparently this is following a half-fae, half-human princess who is forced to marry the loathsome, unseelie Fae Prince, and he treats her absolutely terribly until they start to kind of get common ground, start kind of falling for each other, only for her then to be given to his enemy. So I'm assuming there's a bit of a love triangle, but I've heard really, really good things about this book and cannot wait to read it. This is also, like I said, by Ella Fields. If you have not read Ella Fields yet, one of the best fantasy romance authors I've ever read. Her books are typically pretty dark, but also they have the best FMCs. So definitely check her out if you haven't yet. Next up, we have Embers in the Snow, which is a dark vampire fantasy romance. In this story, we are following a baron's daughter who is forced into an arranged marriage with Carven, who was, from what I remember, a soldier who ends up being cursed and forced to live in this like Arctic frozen land and doesn't come out during the day. So obviously our main character is absolutely terrified to marry this person. So the beginning of this story is really her just journeying to her betrothed's estate. And then once she gets there, it's just them trying to get to know each other, but all of these terrible things just keep happening around them. So when I was discussing this book with Jen from the Book Refuge, she actually referred to this as like small town fantasy romance, because there isn't a ton of action in this. However, it was still a very enjoyable read. I was really just betting on them and hoping that they would finally get the HEA that they both deserved. But overall, a very solid standalone and highly, highly recommend. And last up, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. So this story starts off, I believe, in the 1700s, and we're introduced with Addie, who ends up making a bargain with a magical being that will allow her to live forever, but the only catch is everyone she meets will forget her. So we then just follow Addie as she goes through life being immortal, but really not having any connections with people because they immediately forget her upon her walking away from them. Until one day she is at a bookstore and a person does end up remembering her, and it's their romance. So overall, I did really enjoy this book. I will say I enjoyed Peaches and Honey slightly more, which has a very similar plot. The only issue with Peaches and Honey is it is part of the series, so I couldn't include it in this video. But if you are looking for a standalone, highly recommend The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Alright guys, those are some of my favorite fantasy romance standalones. Please let me know down in the comments below. What is your absolute favorite Romantasy standalone? And I'd like to say a special thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Jess, Kat, Kylie, Lotta, and Leslie. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.